Welcome to the Fearless Project podcast. I'm your host, Dominque Hoffman, and today I'm joined by Hadeel Oueis to discuss the Arab world's current political position on the Palestinian question and to look at what key Arab actors hope for in a potential ceasefire with Israel and the conclusion of the Israel-Hamas war. Hadeel is one of our research fellows here at the Fearless Project, and so I'm so excited to be joined by her. Welcome.
Thank you, Dominique.
Thank you for being here. Do you want to give our audience a little bit of background on where you're from, what your expertise is in?
Yes, so this is Hadeel Oueis. Currently, I live in DC area in Maryland. I came to the US from Syria 12 years ago, and now I'm a research fellow with the Philos Project. And I've been always involved in politics since I was 18. When I was 18, the uprising started in Syria, and I was active in it from day one. I believe that the Syrian people deserves a better life, deserves to live a better in a better situation on all levels, deserves to have peace with their neighbors. So I was very active in the uprising. I ended up being jailed for political reasons in Syria in 2011. A few months later, I decided to leave Syria, and here I am. I'm in the US.
Well, we're glad to have you. And you're going to provide us with a unique perspective from the Arab perspective on what a lot of these countries are hoping for at the end of this war. And you've also seen the region change since your early days of activism. So we're excited to hear about that. So last week, Hamas provided a ceasefire proposal via kind of their broker, Qatar, who's been a key actor in ceasefire negotiations. And the proposal is for a 4.5 month ceasefire, which would happen in 3 stages. And it would result in the release of the remaining hostages in exchange for 1,500 Palestinian prisoners, 500 of which are serving life sentences in Israel. Hamas would maintain its power in Gaza, and the IDF would withdraw under this proposal. And Israel would also fund a 3-year infrastructure plan to rebuild Gaza after the war. And not surprising, Israel rejected this plan. A permanent ceasefire is a non starter for Israel. They seek to get the hostages back, but they do not want Hamas to continue in power in Gaza post war. After Israel's rejection, the U.S. has continued to talk with Egypt, Qatar, Israel, and also Gaza on a potential truce. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be an agreement in sight. We're also waiting to see what happens in the south in Rafah with Israel's offensive happening there. So, Hadeel, what is the Arab world's thoughts on the proposed ceasefire?
Yes, thank you again, Dominique. So I think it depends on which Arabs are we talking about, because we know that there is this conflict between some of the Arab countries and Israel, but there are also bigger disputes and conflicts between Arabs themselves. There are some Arab countries and groups like United Arab Emirates who lists Hamas as a terror organization. They want to see Hamas defeated, and after the terrorist attacks of October 7th. There is Saudi Arabia that has also very optimistic vision for the future in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. They don't want to see a terrorist organization like Hamas prevail from this bloody war and conflict. They want to see Hamas defeated. There are certain groups in the Arab world who are connected more to the Muslim Brotherhood, political Islam. They want Hamas to survive, and they want this ceasefire proposal by Hamas that will give Hamas the time to try to survive and try to come back to power in Gaza, which, by the way, Hamas is losing right now. When we talk about Rafah, we're talking about the last few miles where Hamas still exists. Hamas still has some military presence, but Hamas is almost defeated right now on the ground. In general, the Arab governments, I would say, they want this conflict to stop. They want Hamas to be weakened because the conflict is not only in Gaza today. The conflict is everywhere in the region. It's reaching the Red Sea, the Gulf region, where the U.S. has thousands and thousands of U.S. troops stationed over there. We saw the sad news about the killing of 3 U.S. members on the Syrian Jordanian borders. The conflict is on the borders between Lebanon and Israel and inside Iraq, where the U.S. still has troops. So everyone in the region wants this conflict to stop. But of course, there are these groups that are connected to the Iranian regime, of course, and also connected to the political Islam, Muslim Brotherhood groups. They want Hamas to prevail because this will help them in their local communities. Hezbollah, other Iran backed militias, they will become more powerful in their local communities inside Lebanon, inside Iraq, if Hamas won this war, or at least was able to survive this war.
Hmm. And could you speak a little bit to what's happening in Rafah? I think a lot of people in the West are confused. I know the United States and a lot of Arab countries are condemning Israel moving into Rafah. I know that was a safe zone, or it has been deemed a safe zone in the war so far. So why is Israel entering Rafah? And is this the last phase of the war?
Mhm. Exactly. I'll start where you ended. It is the last phase of the war. When we are talking about Rafah, as I mentioned, we're talking about the last few miles of Gaza that Israel haven't entered yet. Israel is not entering every corner and every street in Gaza to go after civilians. They are going after Hamas and Al Qassam cells, the military militias who are fighting Israel. And Israel now is almost certain that Hamas doesn't have any power, any armed power in most of the areas of Gaza. But this is not the case yet when it comes to Rafah. The thing is, because Israel was able to push Hamas back and defeat Hamas in most of the areas in Gaza, in 90% of Gaza, now many of these Hamas militias cells moved to Rafah, which is the last few miles remaining of Gaza without Israel entering. And because also the fact that Rafah is on the border with Egypt, many of the civilians, many of the people who escaped the war and escaped the conflict in the other parts of Gaza, they ended up in Rafah because they thought Hamas will surrender before the Israeli military reached Rafah. The Israeli military wanted Hamas to surrender and to stop fighting way before Rafah. Weeks ago, but Hamas is insisting on fighting, insisting on surviving this war. This is why they are putting the civilians who are in Rafah, as before they put the civilians who were in other parts of Gaza, as human shields to continue this war. Everyone is concerned if the Israeli army now goes to Rafah, there will be fighting in Rafah, and in this way, there will be no other area where the civilians, the Gazan civilians, to escape to, because Egypt doesn't want to open the borders to the civilians. and this will make it very hard to the civilians to survive this war. But also, if we keep Hamas militias and Hamas weapons all in remain in Rafah, this will be a very important and strong area for Hamas to start attacking Israel again from it, because in Rafah, Hamas will be able to relax, that there will be no fight anymore with Israel, and this way they will say, we survived, we didn't lose this war.
Hmm. And can you explain for our audience why Egypt won't open that border to civilians? I know that Egypt was proposing a ceasefire or advocated for a ceasefire back in December that would require Hamas to relinquish power. So, what is Egypt's view on Hamas and what are their fears there?
Egypt itself suffered from Hamas for years, because Hamas is an Islamist organization that has, in a way or another, connections with other terrorist and jihadi organizations that were active inside Egypt, that committed terror attacks inside Egypt, weakened the Egyptian economy, weaken the Egyptian army and security forces' ability to control the country and prevent such terror attacks inside the Egypt. So Egypt, in principle, is not with Hamas, but Egypt is very worried today from the conflict, from what's happening in Gaza, because it's happening on its own borders, because Egypt is a very important and powerful and influential Arab country that has to play a role in ending this conflict. So there is a moral responsibility, a military responsibility, a political responsibility that Egypt is bearing right now. And that's making Egypt very worried about the future, what's going to happen. Egypt is one of the countries that I would say that they don't want Hamas to go out of this conflict stronger. They don't want Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, political Islam to say that our theory, our example in Gaza prevailed, because the current government of Egypt is a government that struggled with the Muslim Brotherhood when they took over Egypt as well, and the Egyptian people also suffered when they were under Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood groups that controlled Egypt for a couple of years are, at the end of the day, the same group. They have the same ideology. So, in principle, Egypt is not with Hamas, of course, but also Egypt has a lot of responsibilities. And there is also the Arab public opinion. And the public opinion has big solidarity with the Palestinian issue in general. And those who have solidarity with the Palestinian issue think that if more people from Gaza are going to leave Gaza to another country, Israel will come and control Gaza, and then these Palestinians will never go back to their land. So, because of this theory, there is a public pressure on the Egyptian government, on other governments, to not open the borders to Gazans.
Hmm. In closing, I'm going to ask, and this is from your expert opinion, do you think a ceasefire is viable at this point in the war? And is the Arab world optimistic of any sort of a peace process?
I think there is a possibility for a ceasefire, but I don't see how it's going to happen if Hamas is not going to accept the idea that they shouldn't be in control anymore in Gaza. Because, as I mentioned before, if Hamas prevail, if Hamas portray itself as a winner from this war, it's not only Israel that's going to bear the ramifications of this win for Hamas. It's the entire region. Egypt, that did not want Muslim Brotherhood in charge, will suffer. Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, the Gulf region, all these countries, the majority of the people, they don't want this mentality of uh, groups that are mixing politics with religion to take over and control their countries. This is why Hamas should accept that they're not going to rule Gaza anymore, and this is how there will be a ceasefire. There should be a new model that govern Gaza, and unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority is too weak, and this is uh, another problem that's preventing the U.S., preventing the international community from finding the alternative to Hamas. Let me end by mentioning something very important, which is why something that resonates with the Philos project and what we do in the Philos project. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are many conflicts, many disputes in this region, in the Middle East. Some of these conflicts are bloodier than the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. But the reason why this conflict is very popular and has been very popular from the beginning among the Muslim community is because uh, it is being viewed as Jewish against Muslims or Muslims against Jewish. And this tells us about how important is religion and ethnicities are in this region, and how much they influence the opinions of the people in this region. Some people now tend to forget how many tens of thousands of civilians Iran killed in Syria or Iran killed in Iraq, because Iran is a Muslim country and the victims were Muslims, while there is all this focus on what's happening in Gaza, on the Israeli Palestinian conflict, because it's a group from another religion that's in a conflict with a Muslim group, which is the Palestinians. This is why this conflict today is more well known to the world and to the people of the region than any other conflict in a region that's suffering from a lot.
Mm. Well, Hadeel, thank you so much. This was so insightful, providing that Arab perspective, and we'll continue to follow this. And I'm sure over the next few weeks, especially after Rafah, there'll be more developments, and we can have you back on to go over those. Where can our audience follow you and the work that you're doing?
Thank you, Dominique. I'm going to watch this podcast, and I'm looking forward to joining you in the future as well. The followers and the viewers can follow me on Hadeel Oueis in Twitter. This is where I publish all the work I do in Arabic media and in American media.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And for our audience, you can follow the Fearless Project podcast on all streaming services, and I'll see you next week.